John, I want to just give you a moment to react to what you just heard, the reception you've received from this crowd.
I'd say I'm speechless, but I don't think I'm allowed to be. A true, really lifetime honor, and almost also a sadness that speaking the truth is something unique, and having the courage to speak with the truth that you know. So I'm deeply honored. It's amazing to be here, and I can't thank you enough.
Since October 7th, you have been one of the staunchest defenders, as we just heard, of Israel's military operations in Gaza. But tell us how you came to choose to do this work. Was it strictly from a professional point of view and your expertise in this area, or was there something personal motivating you as well?
Yeah, so it's definitely both. Professionally, of course, I had the unique knowledge which some people might have viewed as useless before we come to this time. 10 years of studying just urban warfare. With great knowledge comes great responsibility, but it did become personal. I was 25 years in the military, basically re-raised in the military with values like duty, service, courage as part of the key of who I am. But now I have young children, and I'm trying to raise them with certain values. And I don't want to live in a world where the truth doesn't matter and that people don't have the courage to stand up for the truth.
As you can tell from the reception you're receiving this morning, it means so much to the Jewish community around the world, to the people of Israel, to have allies like you in this fight. And showing moral courage is not something that we take for granted, and we know that it can sometimes come with personal risk and professional risk. What has been the response that you have received from colleagues in the military profession? Have you received personal backlash?
Yeah, I've definitely received backlash, and not all good attention is good intention. I've had people try to get me fired. I've had people write to my employer trying to get me fired. I've had a very big newspaper, New York Times, basically after the Prime Minister mentioned my name in his address to Congress, mentioned my research. They decided, well, let's decredit, remove the authority of John Spencer. And they assigned somebody for a year to dig into every amount of my personal, professional life to try to discredit me. And I don't know if they're planning to try harder, but what I say to anybody, and there's a quote about don't argue with stupid people; they'll bring you down to their level and beat you with experience. But I stand by my information. I can argue with anybody because everybody can have their own opinions. They can't have their own facts.
So let's talk a little bit about misinformation, because in addition to actual warfare that Israel is engaged in, we are all fighting an information war. So much of what we see in the media, in the press, on social media in particular, truly is a mischaracterization of what's actually happening on the ground. Can you help us understand where the drivers of this misinformation come from, and are there particular instances that you see online that are just particularly egregious?
Well, I spend a lot of time online, probably too much, as you know, attacking the largest amounts of disinformation, which sometimes have a kernel of truth and sometimes are just fiction. And I saw that start in, going back to why I do this. I've lost friends because of my advocacy for the truth, and that happens to be advocacy for Israel, because I do believe they're doing everything that, more than anybody in the history of war, to protect civilians, in this case an enemy civilian, to include feeding the enemy's population. But I actually lost friends on October 7th, so there are friends that matter and those that are no longer friends. I can't give you, there's such a long list. I started seeing the lies on October 8th. Like, Gaza is the densest place on earth. Look, I study cities for a living. Somebody hasn't been traveled the world if they think that. There's places around the world. There's not even in the top 100. But then it started with what I say in my world, there's 3 types of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. So I had to start, at first I fought fire with fire, like, look, if you want to go into numbers, I know where the bodies are hidden, literally. I know the numbers, and this came to this, and I actually got told last month that, hey, you're the ratio guy. You're the civilian to combatant ratio guy, right? Like, no, that's not me. I actually know, again, from studying war, that no other nation has been asked, despite all the context, yeah, but what's your civilian to combatant ratio? Nobody. So this is where I've come to realize, although I have seen, and why I'm such a champion for the truth, is that I've seen anti-Semitism being cloaked in everything. I've seen anti-Israel, anti-Zionism being cloaked in lies, damn lies, and statistics. So the problem being, though, is that nobody knows what any of these numbers mean. And that's where you can take the number and make it whatever you want it to be. And that's another really fascinating book, but where figures don't lie, but liars sure do figure. So this is the number, no matter what it is, no matter who's giving the number, it means Israel is in the wrong. And I've seen this play out in reality, right? So Natan Sharansky's, first the double standard, delegitimize, demonize. I've seen that in spades. But I actually don't think this, what I write about, what I talk about is that this is crazy. This isn't a double standard. This is an Israeli standard in war. Like this question of what is your civilian to combatant ratio? This is what the law, redefining genocide, redefining war crimes, all of this stuff. And I'm standing in the door saying, no, that's not right.
From your experience, in the United States military, from your deep knowledge of urban warfare and international law, you approach this, as you just said, from truly a fact-based, research-based, statistic-based approach. And so much of this conversation ends up with an emotional reaction and ignores the facts. For all of us who are engaged every day on the ground in our communities, we're never going to have the level of expertise that you have. But how can we better arm ourselves to be advocates?
I would say read what I write, but I think everybody...
No doubt everyone does.
That's right. Because it is hard to quickly identify where the fact is in that kernel of truth, and then the inference, the correlation, the lie, the narrative. Where I have chosen to start fighting people online who aren't experts, and for some reason expert has become a bad thing, but where they're redefining words like morality. It's been crazy. To arm, I often get this question, like what's the short one-pager that I can arm myself with? There's so many variations of what's going on versus the reality of actually being there. And I actually also agree that a lot of people have these emotional, like you can't convince them otherwise, ideals about Israel and Gaza, although they've never been. They never looked across a field and seen Gaza. They've never been in Far Gaza and looked across a field and seen where more Gazan civilians cross the wire to commit atrocities than actual Hamas. They don't know these things. Within my realm of war, of course, there's a long list of, like the civilian to combatant ratio, stop playing that, that's not how war works, or any other number that's effects-based, the fact that it doesn't matter what Israel does. It doesn't matter that Israel has done more to prevent civilian harm than any military in history. John, look at these pictures. Look at these figures. Look at these numbers. That's not how war works. Or even Hamas, to characterize Hamas as something different than what it is. or what it says. It actually, in its charter, in its multiple charters, it doesn't just want the destruction of Israel and the death of Jewish people in Israel. It wants the death of Jewish people around the world. And this leads to what's his strategy, but also his tactics. So another thing that I like to highlight to everybody that seems to forget is that since October 7th, but also before that, if you've ever studied the history of Hamas, Hamas does not deploy a human shield strategy. Hamas deploys a human sacrifice strategy. Everything it's done in Gaza in its approach to destroying Israel and killing the Jewish people is to sacrifice its population. Everything it says and everything it does, it built Gaza for war. Billions of dollars, 400 miles of tunnels, and I also point out that that every of the 2 million people in Gaza, all of them could fit in Hamas's tunnels with ease. But not one of them is allowed because Hamas says and acts, it actually says this: I need the death of my women, children, elderly, all of them to achieve in the afterlife my goal. So that human shield versus human sacrifice strategy, but the list is so long of just straightforward, like, this is crazy. How have we turned into a world where the victim becomes the aggressor? Where no matter what the other side says, it doesn't matter. They have these ideals about what should happen. Just like the ceasefire now. Ceasefire now would be you want the war to continue forever. Just a cycle of violence.
So let's talk a little bit about the current military strategy and operations in Gaza. Do you think the current strategy is working? Where do you see this going? And in terms of other threats in the region to Israel, whether it be from Hezbollah or the Iranian threat, what do you assess as the most critical needs for the Israeli military at this moment?
That's a hard one. So as a war analyst, as a war researcher, that's what I do. So if I was to analyze how's the war going for both sides, Hamas no longer has a military. Hamas struggles to maintain power. That isn't from trying. The strategy moving forward and actually understanding what came before, even since October 7th, is what has Israel been allowed to do? And from unfortunate statements like the correct number of civilian casualties in this war is 0. That was a call for Israel to be defeated, in my opinion. Don't go to Rafah, where the leadership is, where the hostages are. I understand that war is the pursuit of political goals. It's always fought in both an internal political environment, but an international and global political environment. So the biggest challenge for the IDF right now, although Hamas's military has been dismantled, it had this vast military of over 30 to 50,000 fighters, 5 brigades, 20,000 rockets, the ability to hold ground and do attacks. It doesn't have that anymore. Yes, it has a lot of radicalized. The average age of a new Hamas recruit is 16 and a half. So yeah, it has a lot of radicalized people that will join and form this guerrilla force. The biggest challenge, though, to get to your question, is will. Right? War is a contest of will. And people think it's just between the two militaries. And it is that. You're trying to convince your enemy to do what you want it to do, like surrender, stop holding hostages, all these things. But it's also a contest of will politically, and we've seen that play out since October 7th, where you've had national leaders parroting Hamas's numbers or parroting false information, which is really problematic. While Israel has also been attacked on 7 different fronts. So to talk about the strategy against Hamas, you can't talk that without talking about how Israel dismantled and did to Hezbollah in a matter of weeks, showing the power of Israel and what it did for the Islamic regime in Iran's circle of fire around Israel, how it's made the Middle East safer, all of this. But it really comes down to the will of the people. So like the Israeli society, and this happens in war as well, like, look, the cost has been too much. In war, you have to maintain the will of the people. So for the IDF, the tactics, the IDF have proven to do the unthinkable, and from somebody who studies war, multiple times, to include in Gaza, the ability to separate the population, kill Hamas fighters, kill or capture. It's been, unimaginable, which is really Israel's military history. But the biggest challenge is the people understanding what it will take, right? This is the ideal. You can't defeat an ideology, right? So I study wars, and like, that's not true. Come on. That's like saying I want to pull the German population while I defeat the Nazis, and you can't defeat them this way. It's the misapplication of frameworks. I absolutely think that Hamas can be defeated, that the Gazan population can be de-radicalized. I also think that anti-Semitism in the United States, for us, can be depowered, a light shown on it, and remove it from its power. And that's war, right? We're at war with anti-Semitism. Israel is at war with Hamas. It can absolutely be defeated, its weapons taken, and it be de-radicalized. But that takes time and it takes resources.
So we're all engaged. We're all engaged in this war against anti-Semitism. And we often feel like, I think, as American Jews, that we are shouting into the void at times. What advice would you give to everyone in this room on how to hold on to that sense of purpose in this fight, drawing on your background in the U.S. military and the values that have been instilled in you for 25 years in your career? How can we hold on to that sense of purpose and drive in this fight?
Yeah, it's a great question. And as I visited Israel quickly after October 7th, and as I visited the IDF soldiers in Gaza, they don't question why they're doing what they do and why they're doing it with moral and ethical conviction, protecting civilians, is that they can see their homes behind them. They can see the rockets from Hamas that land inside Gaza often. They can see them going over their heads and headed towards their homes. There's no question on why they're fighting and that they will continue to fight until the job's done. I think the same is here for us. The number one thing I tell anybody is fight. We all have to fight. A single candle in the darkness can light a room.
John, from all of us here at AJC, we are so grateful to have you as an ally in this fight. We have felt as a community that very few friends have been willing to stand by us, and today's program is hopefully proving us wrong, that we do have friends and allies in this fight. Thank you so much from the bottom of all of our hearts.